Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above the Bar podcast, where each week we belly up to the bar with a new guest, find out what they do, who they are, and what makes them great. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Alrighty, folks, welcome back to the Above the Bar podcast. It's your host, Sean. If you're wondering yourself, as I just spit on myself, what did I do here? If you're wondering to yourself again, why is he here on a Saturday? What is going on in the world? Well, as I've told you before, when opportunity knocks, you got to take it. And I had an opportunity to meet somebody pretty awesome who's right in my backyard. She's also part ninja. Every guy likes to talk to a ninja. So I love the fact that you're right up the road. Like, that's probably already, to me, when people are so close, that's one of the most exciting things to me. So joining us from up here in the good old Adirondack Mountains to talk about a little bit of self-care, what it means, how do we take care of ourselves in different manners. It's Miss Jan. And Jan, you know what I should have asked beforehand? Is it Raeder?
Raeder.
See, and I'd have said Reader because I can't. It's Miss Jan Raeder.
Hello. How are you?
Good, Jan.
So happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here. I'm just fixing. I love StreamYard. I really do. But it has like this weird habit of every time I start, and I'd say this every week, I feel like now, as soon as I go to start a show, it likes to change my privacy setting to me only. And I'm like, nope. We want other people to see the show. So Jan's going to be talking to us about self-care. What does it mean, self-care? What does that have to do with using her background? Again, we were joking there. She is here in the capital region. I don't know. Is that considered capital region? I would call it capital region.
I guess so. I suppose so. Yeah. Well,
it's good enough. I mean, good enough for government work.
Absolutely.
So she's here in the capital region. We're going to be talking. So before we get too far into that, as we always got to do, folks, let's talk about the big board behind me for Sticker and a Cause. Say you've got something that you're supporting. You've got your own band. You got your own podcast. You got your own dojo. I don't care what it is. You can reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, X. We've got our website, theabovethebarpodcast.com. We've got our email address, theabovethebarpodcast@gmail.com. Reach out to us. Let us know what you've got going on. I'll give you the address. You send me out a sticker. We'll read about you live here on the air. It doesn't cost you anything. Get a little bit of publicity. As we always say, one hand wash the other. We all got to support each other here at the bar. So that's how those things work. Now, the other thing we got to talk about is our sponsor, the folks that pay the bills around here and know what's going on. And that's going to be Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Hudson and Coxsackie, and Schoharie. Each one of those three locations are sponsors of ours. They do an amazing job with window treatment, specializing in everything from shutters, drapery, blinds. They do tint, you name it, and it's all in-house. Their window treatments even come with some of them up to a lifetime, one-time, no questions asked replacement. Meaning that if you're out there breaking boards and one of those splinters runs through a shade and tears it all up, you don't have to worry about it. You can reach out to them and they'll go ahead and replace that shade for you. So make sure you're reaching out to your local Budget Blinds and Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Hudson and Coxsackie, and Schoharie. For the month of February, you got a little bit of time left, folks. They are running a 20% off sale on all their window treatments. And if you tell them that you're there to belly up to the bar, that you heard about them here on the show, they're going to give you an additional 5% off of your window treatments. So make sure you're reaching out to Budget Blinds of East Greenbush, Hudson and Coxsackie, and Schoharie. So, all right, Jan, everything's done. So
awesome.
How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for asking.
So let's start here. So you took your first karate class 30 years ago. I'm not sure how you did that at age 28. That you've been doing karate longer than you've been alive. So you're going to have to explain that one to me. But 30 years. What was that first class? I mean, I remember my first martial arts class and being like, I'm going to get hurt. This is going to hurt at some point. So what was your first class like?
Well, it's an interesting story. When I started the school that I actually wound up teaching at and becoming the business manager of, we had 6 intro lessons. And so I was taking my first intro lesson, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, how I got to be perfect. Do I have to be like Bruce Lee or something? And that there's 6 of these. And I asked the person that was teaching me, I said, can I watch a class? And after about the 3rd lesson, I decided to go ahead and watch a class. And I went, oh, okay, I can do this because there's actually, I'm a perfectionist. Oh, I should say I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Recovering.
Um, but yeah, so I realized, oh, I can do this. And then as soon as I started, I was home. I felt I was home.
Just
I mean,
felt
I've
right.
been physically active my whole life. Um, I was a gymnast. I don't know. I just always was physically active. My mother used to tell me all the time, you never sat down for dinner. I always had my knee on the chair and I was ready to run out the door.
Just push off from
So,
the table and go.
yeah. So as soon as I got into the classes, actual classes after the intro ones, I just it was I was bit by the bug. It was my home.
That's
And after that, there was just no stopping me. I took, let's see, probably about 4 to 6 classes a week,
oh wow. You really
because
did.
I loved it. And then after that, I started to get involved with. I was volunteering on Wednesday nights to kind of just answer the phones. And then the manager of the school moved, so I was offered the position to manage the school. And and then I had to teach classes sometimes, even though I wasn't a black belt at that point. I think I was a brown belt when I taught my first black belt class when I was a brown belt.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because there was an emergency and the instructor had to leave, so it was me. And to keep myself calm, because I was in a room full of people that had probably collectively, there was 150 years of experience or
Oh wow.
more in the room. So, and here I am, I'm like, what am I? I'm not going to teach them anything. So I just decided to run a workout, where I just had them doing techniques and stuff. So after that, I can, and then once I got my black belt, which I wound up getting my black belt in 3.5 years instead of the 4 years that our school focused on, because we thought of it as kind of like a degree in
Okay.
college. Um,
I can see
if
that.
you and I still, my opinion now still is the same. If you're getting a black belt within, because some schools award them in a year to 2 years, um, you don't really have much other than a piece of dark cloth around your waist. Because really, if you know the story of the black belt, it's a white belt that the belt got so dirty
From
because of
training.
all your rolling around on the floor and your experiences and so on, and you never, ever, ever wash your belt. Um, that's where the black belt came from, that the belt was just so dark. And it really, the colors of the belt are really just an indication of how long you've been training, how much you put into it, and so on. So, that's there's so much that you learn through training. Did you mention before that you train yourself too?
I did. So besides so 20 years in the Marine Corps.
Hmm.
Um so besides learning, I did a little bit of like that kids stuff where you're like, hey, bring your kids over. We'll teach them how to punch at things,
Right.
that kind of thing. Um I actually spent time Marine Corps martial arts program, uh started with what they called line training, which is
Hmm.
very different. I mean, it's more akin to a Krav Maga type
Hmm.
thing, where like
Yeah.
they teach you like every movement starts with an eye gouge, a throat punch, or a
Hmm.
groin hit,
Hmm.
and then finishes with a heel strike to the temple. That was like every move, like break their arm, shove it in, pull it out,
Yeah. Yeah.
strike to the Achilles. Now heel strike to the side of that, because we were Marines. That was what we needed to
Right.
do. That was our world. So a lot of it was that. And then I did spend 3 years. It was funny when you mentioned brown belt. I studied 3 years with Aikido and some sword work. And I always tell people my brown belt test for Aikido was a legal ass whooping, like
Mhm.
completely sanctioned. I'll never forget, I was a young Marine going for this test, and it was all black belts I had to go against. But in
Mhm.
ours, with being Aikido, you weren't allowed to strike. There was no
Yeah. Yeah.
striking. So it was
Right.
like, they're going to strike at you. You need to guard. You need to redirect. You need
Yep.
to do what you need to do. And the first black belt that walked up on me was a guy who had taken had been like not an amateur boxer, but he had done tons and
Mm.
tons of boxing, had been in the boxing ring enough times. Hit me on an exhale. Knew how to hit like I was like,
Nice. Yeah.
and I went down like a sack of potatoes.
Yep.
And as I hit the ground, I felt him start kicking me, and
Yeah.
I could hear the Shihan go, "You might want to get up because he's
Yeah.
not going to stop." And
Right.
I realized at that point I had to like push him away and
Yep.
fight my way back to my feet, waiting on the next one. But yeah, it was but I love that. I did that.
Yep.
I did Aikido, and then I can't remember the name of what I started another one. It was on base. It was akin to an Aikido kind of judo thing, but
Mhm.
very, very heavy throw related.
Mhm.
And um I wasn't a big fan of, like, I loved learning how to throw people by their head,
Yeah.
but I really wasn't a big fan of, like, "Okay, your turn," and somebody, like, throwing that hip back while holding onto my head and tossing me. I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah. This is
yeah,
not so fun. Yeah.
this is great." Like, and at that point, I was only in my 30s, but I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna end up in traction."
Yeah.
To somebody, because I did that to somebody. I felt so bad.
Yeah.
I had a guy, we were training, and I thought he was uh, a little more prepared for what we were gonna be doing, and he pushed at me, and I grabbed him and pulled him down and did a leg, pushed him over with my legs. Well, he wasn't prepared, and he landed
Uh,
flat,
yeah.
and that was the last time he ever trained with us. He
Yeah.
tore his shoulder, and I was like,
Yeah.
and folks, as we're talking about this, I promise you, no one who trains wants to hurt the person they're
No, 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 you don't. As a matter of fact, my experience is my form of martial arts, it's Okinawan and Japanese
okay.
karate. So which one of my pet peeves is nothing against taekwondo, but a lot of they use the word karate and it is not karate. Taekwondo is a Korean martial art. It's not Okinawan Japanese, which is karate. And that's more 50-50 as opposed to taekwondo is, you get more kicks in taekwondo. But it's interesting that you're telling that story because I remember when I think I was a Shodan, first degree black belt, and
Okay.
I was sparring, and I should never have sparred that day because I was sitting in the parking lot, and this was my norm. I would sit in the parking lot and squeeze my um, steering wheel and take deep breaths because you could, like you said, you could get your butt kicked
Yeah.
every single time that you went in. And so I would sit there and I'd go, okay. And I had a ritual. I would remove my jewelry. I would breathe and I'd go, you can do this. You can do this. And then I'd go in and the one thing that and I used to teach the students this too, because I was taught this, is when you tied your belt, that's when everything you brought in was gone. When you made that physical motion of popping your knot, you let everything else go. And now you're here for what's going on. So this particular day that I was there was a black belt class. We used to have black belt classes on Thursday night. And we, of course, sparred in every single class. So we get to the sparring portion. I should have never been in the class. And I'm sparring with a student and another student, and I dropped my hands. And he hit me in the face, right in
Oh,
my cheek, with a hook kick. So I got hit with a heel right here in my face. And a couple things happened. One, I realized really quickly that it doesn't hurt to get hit in the face right at the impact. It's shocking. And that's really what happens more. It's the shock of all of a sudden you're hit in the face. I mean, later it hurt. I'm not going to say, oh, it didn't hurt me. But at the initial hit, you were like shocking.
oh.
And then the instructor pulled me aside, took my mouth guard out, wanted to make sure everything was okay, brought me into office and sat me down. And that's when I started to cry because I was like, shock.
Right.
So I wound up breaking my it
Orbital.
was my yes. And unfortunately to this day I still have problems with sinus infections because of that. But it's interesting that you said no one wants to hurt anyone.
No.
The guy that I was sparring with, he quit.
Because he felt bad that he had hurt you?
Yes, and I said to him many times, and he didn't quit right away. Probably like a month later, he quit. But I said to him many times, I had no hard feelings because he didn't do it intentionally. It was my fault. I dropped my hands. So, and that's what I said to him. I said, this is my fault. I dropped my hands. I shouldn't have done that. And I shouldn't have even been here to begin with because I wasn't in the right frame of mind. But it's interesting that we're talking about this because, if you're going to flip it over to like self-care.
Well, that's what I was about to ask you was go ahead. No, please go ahead.
When you flip it over to self-care and actually in my book, Strive for More, which is more as an acronym, and we'll get into that in a little bit. People take things so personally, and half the time, like whenever you're in front of somebody sparring, and I used to tell this to students all the time, when we're in front of each other, the only thing between us is air. And I have no idea, like if you and I were sparring, I have no idea what happened to you today. You don't know what happened to me. And if you hit me hard, personally for me, I like that because I'm learning something. I know you're making a face, but I'm learning something. And I don't want somebody, I mean, luckily for me, the school that I was involved in, there was never any sense of women and men. We were all martial artists, period. All martial artists. So I personally wanted people to not hold back because I was a woman. Like if I was sparring with a man, I don't want you to hold back because that doesn't help me.
And it's not going to be in the streets that way.
No, right. At some point, we should tell all the listeners, the point of training is so that you never have to use it. It's the point of training is to become self-aware so that you avoid something prior and trust, the hair on the back of your neck standing up when you're in a situation and you just, I don't know, go to the other side of the street and walk down that side. You're not looking for trouble. You want to avoid it. So that's the goal. The goal is to train so that you never have to use it. But when you're doing that and you have somebody's hitting you hard, and in my case, I like that, it's not personal. When they're hitting me, if I take it personal and I feel like, oh, well, you hit me too hard, that moment I've lost in the match.
Absolutely.
Because for one, I'm distracted. Two, I'm getting emotional, and you can't do that. So when I talk to people about, and it's a big pet peeve of mine right now with all the things that are going on, everybody takes things so personally. They act like victims, and it's not about you all the time. And just because somebody is having a bad day doesn't mean that you have to go down the rabbit hole that they're in.
Right.
You can just kind of take a step back, take a breath, and go, Okay, if you want, if you're in a, if like you're at work and maybe you're having a rough conversation with a colleague, you can kind of say to yourself, what can I learn about me through this exchange? Instead of going, well, that guy's a jerk or that woman's, she's not very nice or whatever. Instead of putting it on the other person, one, be compassionate because they might have had a bad day. And two, what can I learn about me? How can I take something from this exchange? So that's one of the things that, when I talk about self-care to people, and for me, self-care is not that these aren't great things. Getting together with your friends on a Friday night, having a drink, that's a great thing, but it's not long lasting.
Right. It's not
And
long-term self-care.
right. And, getting a massage, or like women, they like to, do manicures, pedicures, that kind of, those kind of things. Those are all wonderful things. But in my opinion, true self care is understanding who you are as a person and working on this, because your relationship with yourself is the longest one you have in your entire life. So if you don't like yourself and know yourself, you're in for a rough ride. plus,
Absolutely. Well, real
plus
quick,
when you bump up against people, if you're not good at this, you're not going to have great interactions with other people.
I absolutely have to agree with that. And even my aunt Eileen just said she loves that. And look, folks, if you're just joining us and you're curious about Jan and what she's got going on, you can check her website out at selfcaresensei.com. And Sensei is SENSEI, Self-Care Sensei. For those of you that are watching, please take a moment, hit that like, share, follow. If you're on YouTube, follow our YouTube page. It may sound cliche, but that's how more of Jan's message gets out. And if you have questions, maybe you're wondering like, hey, how do you define self-care? Maybe it's not these things, or you've tried some of these short-term results like, hey, retail therapy, or I'm going to
Right.
go and do these other things. But it's interesting. One of the things you said, and I'm wondering how you handle this in your book, Strive for More. And again, more is that acronym standing for meaning, optimism, meaning, optimism, relationship, and engagement. You said something that kind of clicked with me about when you get hit in the face. There's a great saying from Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. Uh, it's interesting how so many people have a plan, life punches them in the face, and they become 100% emotional, like it's a personal attack on them and only them.
Yep.
And and I'm curious, because when you said the guy threw his hands up and slowly quit, something that triggered in my head is it had nothing to do with him hurting you.
Yeah.
It didn't. And I'm going to tell you that from what it was, is that was an amazing, easy excuse to quit on something that was way more difficult and
Yep.
took more commitment than they were prepared for. Oh, I hurt somebody. I can't I'm so afraid I could hurt somebody. I don't know my own strength. I must be a real badass that I got to stop this now. I could really hurt somebody. Could you imagine my hand was a weapon?
Yeah.
In your book, again, folks, Strive for More. As you built these key pillars and some of the different things I'm seeing, the stuff you use, how did you literally, like, what was your process to say, I think I got something that everyone needs. I need to write this book. How did that even kind of birth itself?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that because, and that you mentioned getting punched in the face of my life, and everyone has crossroads. In psychology, they call them crossroads. We come up against, and they're so different because they're different for everyone. There are some definite. There's like 5 major events that everybody really knows about that can cause a lot of stress. Being in a new relationship, i.e., a marriage or something that's permanent, having a new job or losing a job, buying a house, having a child, and then death like of a family member. These are all main crossroads that lots of people have. But then there's other little ones that people can have, like I don't know, you got passed over for a promotion that you really wanted, or say you interviewed for a job and you didn't get that job. So these can be crossroads for people. And what can happen is they either do what we call in a martial arts situation, they either it's flight or fight. They freeze or they freeze. So or they don't know which way to go. And so what happened to me, because I've had several crossroads in my life, as most people have,
Right.
but one of my crossroads that I had related to martial arts is I had injuries, and that changed the way my training could go. Like I have a bad, I actually have two bad knees. I have a bad foot now because I had a
I feel like it's
wonderful.
a very karate injury is bad knees. Like anyone I
Oh
knew,
yeah, yeah. And
it
mine,
went from karate to aikido for that exact reason.
yes, absolutely. And mine actually was not caused by training. It just was exacerbated. When I was younger, I had a knee injury. And then just over time, I've exacerbated it. And actually, I had my, just as a side note, I had my orthopedic tell me I really wouldn't recommend doing 6,000 kicks a week
Yeah.
because you're not going to have a knee left at all. So I had to stop that, and I did that for about a year. Every morning I got to the dojo at like 5:30 in the morning, and I did probably about 1,000 kicks
Wow.
each day, and I did that 5 to 6 days a week because I was trying to improve my kicks. So I was working on that, and that was a little bit too intense. Um, but anyway, so I had a crossroads where, and I'm sure everybody else can relate to something that's happened to them. And as far as physical crossroads, it can be maybe you got a diagnosis, which I've also had health issues too, because as we age, sometimes that
You're
can happen
human.
to us.
Yep.
Yeah, that can this breaks down. So things shifted for me, and I remember I had three different orthopedics, and I wound up with my final orthopedic, who is still my orthopedic now. I remember him telling me, well, why don't you just go do a rower, like, a rowing machine? And he goes, because that way you're still getting a great workout, but you're not, your legs aren't as involved, your joints, whatever.
The snapping action isn't there.
Right. And I thought to myself, you have no idea what it is to be an actual athlete. Now, I had one of my first orthopedic told me I was a professional athlete because I did this for a living. I taught people, I took classes, because when you teach a martial arts class, you do have to be physical. You're not just
Absolutely.
standing there waving a wand. So, so as a professional athlete, when somebody tells you then you can't do that thing, all of a sudden you're like, this becomes because that's my identity. Now I'm losing my identity. And you have grief over that, which is something we can talk about at another show. But grief is something major that a lot of people that are athletes, that things change, they don't realize they have. They just, don't know what to do. So anyway, so what happened to me is I was like, okay, now that I have these two diagnoses, what do I do? So I wound up going back to higher education. I wanted to get my bachelor's and master's degree, and I started out with only 19 credits,
I
and
saw that.
yeah, and within 4 years, I got both of those degrees. And I remember the first person, because I went to Empire State University, which is it's part of the SUNY system in New York. For those of you that aren't in New York, and you work with a mentor, you work with a PhD. And the first PhD, because I had two mentors. The first one, I was like, I'm here to get this done. I'm not here, just
It's
for
for meat and
fun.
potatoes. I'm not here for fluff.
Right, right. And I was like, I'm not here to get like a class on brewing beer because it's fun. So I was like, I want this paper. So I think I was a little too intense for him. Um, but anyway, I wound up getting focused on that and doing that. And the one person that I took a class from, she said, "Did you ever think about being a health coach?" And I was like, now this was in 2013.
Really
And
is a
I
thing.
went, no. And so I started to dig into that. And then I realized after my bachelor's degree, when I finished my bachelor's degree, I realized I didn't want to coach anybody because I had been doing that. And so I decided during my master's that I was going to try to coach the coaches, coach people who wanted to be coaches. Because when you get into wellness and well being, you have to be a scholar practitioner. You have to have, even if you don't, obviously we don't all know everything, but you have to have good resources that you can give to people that you're working with. So my focus was for my uh, thesis for my master's degree is I developed a certificate program for people who wanted to be health coaches to take at a university level. Because at that time, you could go online and in 6 weeks you got a piece of paper and they said you were a health coach.
Uh,
And it was like, now they're much better. I don't want that, I'm not disparaging anybody now because now there's a lot better programs. So anyway, I set it up for Empire, and they wound up. I don't know. Maybe they have it now, but they didn't take it from me, my program, because I mean, who am I? I'm just a student there. So I taught a course at a local university about well-being theory, and everybody loved the course. They were like, "This is great," because what I like is I have the Eastern philosophy for martial arts, meditation. When you really dig deep into karate, you have to understand traditional Chinese medicine too, and you have to understand the not acupuncture, but like acupressure system. You have to know about pressure points and so on. Now, granted, in martial arts, like you were saying, you're trying to pull somebody's arm off and kill them with it. You know,
that was the Marine Corps. That was the Marine Corps program.
it,
Was way more like,
yeah.
listen,
Well, and
listen,
that makes sense though, because you could be in a
different theory
combat
behind
situation.
word. Yeah, like
You
I wasn't there to make friends.
No, you could be in a combat situation, and you really, you do need to be able to do that. And when you were talking about that, I thought, that's absolutely right. People don't realize how violent the art is because it was for survival. And when you think about, just to segue back to that part of it, when you think about Japanese karate, they were preparing students. They started doing it in the 1900s in the school. They were preparing students for military service. So that's why they ran it very militant like then. In Okinawa, it was different because they were under the rule of Japan,
Yes.
especially during the samurai time of the samurais and so on. So that's where you get all of your weapons, your traditional weapons like your sais, your
No.
tonfas. All of those were farm, a bow. Those were farm implements, and the Okinawans learned how to use those as weapons because they weren't allowed to practice an art out in the open. Um, so the Okinawan system is a little different. They're still violent, but it was more from the self-defense. Japanese system, was more the samurais, that idea of preparing for military service. So anyway, it's not so much now because people don't want that. Like you don't want your 6-year-old learning how to pull somebody's arm off and hit them with it.
Listen, I don't know where your 6-year-old's at, but I'm going to tell you. And real quick again, folks, if you're those of you that are just joining us here, and Nate had made a comment here real quick. He's very into the paranormal investigation. He's used this experience for Shotokan for breathing and grounding himself in kind of scary situations. But
Yeah.
if you've got a question for Jan, you're interested in, hey, what other types of self-care is there? How do you get a hold of her book? You can look up selfcaresensei.com or drop a question in here, making sure, please, if you're out there, hit that like, share, follow, all those kind of things. Listen, if you'd have known my instructor in Aikido, I had there's different forms, and mine was very much into, if your hands touch them, you must inflict pain at every moment of that,
Mhm.
because there's no reason for anyone to be touching you. So if
Right.
it's reached that point that they're inside of your sphere and
Yep.
they've touched you, your only purpose is to inflict pain with every hand motion.
Yep.
And that's interesting, because going back to the self-care side, I think that's something that a lot of people lose is they think of, well, the world has touched me. I need to fall down because I'm not allowed to fight back, because my
Right.
school tells me I got to go find an adult. I can't take care of myself. The world tells me I can't take care of myself. I have to call 911. The world tells me if something's bad, I need to talk to the manager. I can't just have a conversation. So I can't touch that thing
Right.
and make it move and mold to my situation. So I kind of want to get into that with more in your book, Strive for More. Again, folks, more means meaning, optimism, relationship, and engagement, which is very much what I just said. Find out why this happened, be positive, you can take care of it. What is your relationship with the situation, and how do you engage
Mhm.
with it?
Yep.
Uh, so
See,
when
you're already a great student of it.
I'm pretty fart stinker, as my parents would say. Uh, so you've gotten your degree, you're figuring out what you can do with these type of things. At what point, though, do you write the book? And in you kind of said your husband owned a dojo at the time.
Mhm.
Also, like, at what point do you write the book and then say, "Hey, I'm going to go ahead and publish"? And what was that reaction?
Well, for one, um, I wound up after I taught that course at the local university, they wanted me to come back and teach it again, and then the pandemic happened. So I didn't. And I'm the type of person, and anybody out there that might be listening that is either a martial artist or has known one, I'm better in person because I do great with reading nonverbal cues. So, if you're in a room and things aren't going great, you can kind of make a shift to get people back in. And whereas, Zoom, everybody ran to Zoom, and
Oh,
not that I
yes.
have anything against it, but I just wasn't, it wasn't for me. So I decided, well, let me write a book and let me write my course in the form of a book so that somebody could just buy my book. And I call myself your paperback coach because
I like
it's,
that.
it's right there in my book. And everything that I did, I made my book. It's not long. It's 139 pages. It's very succinct. It's very straightforward, and that was by design because I didn't want people to get mired down in too many stories and so on. And I wanted to give them clear scientific evidence of everything. And so there's lots and lots of citations in the book. There's lots of resources in the back of the book so that if you want to dig deeper, you're able to dig deeper. But the when you think about meaning, because that's actually one of the pillars that's a
M
little
and
bit
more.
more abstract, um, the M meaning, and that's one of the things that researchers, positive psychology researchers, have found makes us all feel like we're living a life that's worthwhile. Is if we have meaning in our lives, and that can be meaning of something larger than yourself, or like we're talking about these martial arts stories, they mean something to us. you
Absolutely.
learn you learn something about yourself from that. I understand after fighting, I figured it out one time. I think it was close to 15,000 rounds in all my time that I've fought. And Malcolm Gladwell said, if you read his book,
10,000
Tipping
hours.
Tipping Point, about 10,000 hours, that you really need to have at least 10,000 hours. Now, I didn't fight for an hour every
Right.
single round, but every class, it wound up being about a half an hour of fighting. So anyway, you learn about how important that is. Like you were talking about, I can't, I feel like I'm a victim here. I can't take care of this myself.
Yes.
So meaning is important. Like, what is something that's meaningful to you? Do do you believe in something larger than yourself? spirituality is important also, and research shows that people that do believe in things larger than themselves have better existence. When you think about the O, optimism, optimism is tied to positive emotions too. Optimism is a choice. I like to use the word optimism because it shows I'm choosing to look at the bright side. I'm choosing that the glass is half full instead of half empty, which, by the way, science shows the glass is completely full. Because if you hold up your glass, hold up your glass for a second. It's got that much liquid in it, and the rest is air.
And it's still filling the glass.
The glass, right? The glass is completely full. So, if you're going to be a pessimist and think it's half empty, right there, I'm proving to you it's completely full. So, it's a choice, and we have to learn how to be optimistic because we're wired to be negative. We're hardwired to be negative.
Absolutely.
And it was a survival instinct. It's not, we don't necessarily want to take that away.
That's dangerous. I can't go there. I need to stay away from that. What's moving over there? It's safe where I'm standing at because I'm still alive right here.
Yeah, exactly. But the other part of that we don't think about is the fact that positive emotions, they allow us to collaborate with one another. They allow us to create these relationships, which is the R. We'll get to that in a second. And also the relationship with yourself. I always say, and it's a Saturday Night Live reference, nobody likes the Debbie Downer. So you always want to be around upbeat people. They're much more fun. So you can choose to practice being optimistic and having positive emotions. And that's part of what I said earlier about learning about yourself. If you feel like you're a negative person and people go, geez, you're always so upset, maybe you ought to say, gee, why am I upset? Did one of my crossroads slap me right in the face and I didn't wind up blocking and going to the 45 to get out of the way? So you it's a practice, and it's a daily practice because you're always going to go back to that hardwiring if you don't always practice this. And then we come to relationships. Relationships was important to positive psychology researchers because they did this study, the Harvard Grant study, which started in 1937, officially I think in 1938, still going on today. And they learned out of studying these men from Harvard, and then another group joined later, that one of the most important things for their lives was to have solid relationships. Out of all of the data they collected, that was one of the main things, is to have relationships with people, solid relationships. And that's where you believe you're living a good life.
Yeah.
So, and if you think about it, it kind of tags back to meaning. If we're having a relationship with somebody, what does that mean for me? How am I, and how can I show up for that person? If I'm positive, we can collaborate better. We're going to have a better relationship. Same thing, if I don't take it personal, when you're upset and I decide I'm going to learn something about myself from this exchange, it's a good thing. And then finally, engagement. We hear that a lot in the workplace. Workers aren't engaged, and blah, 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 which is fine. I get that. Businesses lose billions of dollars every year, I think, through absenteeism and low productivity. I think the last time I looked at the statistic, it was like $225 billion annually is lost from businesses. So that's important. It's definitely important. But engagement from the positive psychology world is really about flow. Now, you were in a martial arts class. You lost track of time. I can guarantee you lost track of time in the class.
1,000%.
So that when you think about it from this perspective, from the from your living a good life perspective. You want to do things that challenge you. And as you gain skill, you're going to lose yourself in that activity where you're doing it. And all of a sudden you go, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for like an hour and I didn't even realize it. And I always say to people, scrolling on your phone is not a flow activity.
That
it's
is, God, is that the truth?
It's not. I mean, you can lose your, like, because people go, oh, but you lose track of time when you're on reels, and it's like, yes, but it's sucking your brain
Yeah,
dry.
it's not a positive way of
No, no,
and
you're not.
engaging.
You're
Yeah, no.
not learning any skill by
Well,
doing that, and it can be anything. I mean, anybody that's athletic, you know what I'm talking about when
oh yeah,
you are physically active and you're having to execute that skill, you can lose track of where you are. So those are really the things. So what I talk about in my book is if you start to use those different areas and try to bring those things in, and in my book I share 8 um, exercises. I call them well-being wazas because I wanted to put waza in Okinawan Japanese karate means technique. Waza means technique. So I thought it'd be fun to call them well-being wazas. And
nice.
and it's great to practice them. And what I always recommend too to do for people is start with one and then do it for probably a good 2 months, because it takes 21 days to start developing a habit, but it takes 56 for it to actually take hold.
Hmm.
So you got to do it for a while. And then once you kind of get that one down, then go to the next one. Try that one. And then so on and so forth. So it's definitely, and all of the exercises, all the things that I share for you to do are all backed up by science. Because I didn't want to share anything in my book that people would go, well, if I invest my time in this, is this going to work? Because
It's worth my time.
yeah, everybody is got a microwave mindset, you know.
Well,
So
real quick here. So we are getting close to closing the bar here,
yeah.
folks. It's time for last call. And as we're talking to Jan, and this is, these guys will help you with self-care, but only in the short term. And we're talking about the folks over at New Scotland Spirits. If you're looking for a spirit that's as bold and as rich as New York history, New Scotland Spirits is crafting exceptional and locally sourced whiskey that tells a story with every sip. From grain to glass, we honor tradition while pushing the boundaries of flavor. Whether you're a whiskey connoisseur or just getting started, there's a bottle waiting for you. Raise your glass to a true craftsmanship. Find New Scotland Spirits near you. Visit newscotlandspirits.com to learn more. New Scotland Spirits, where history and flavor meet. They're made out of the Helderbergs, Jan. They're in the
Ooh,
Helderbergs. They're
all
right here
right.
local to us. Well,
Awesome.
and all these things, I was snooping around your website here, and I see, your mission statement and a little about you, but I also see you got your book on here. What all can people find out if they go to selfcaresensei.com? And again, folks, this is where you're going to find out what Jan's got going on. You can purchase her book through here, but what else can they figure out from your website?
Well, I do share one of the exercises, the What Went Well exercise. I highly recommend that one. That's great for positivity, for being optimistic. And it's what's great about that activity is the researcher that developed it. They started to use, psychologists started to use that, and people that were depressed patients actually started to feel better, because they were starting to change their perspective on things. And that's really another big thing that we should be talking about is perspective. And it's what I said before about, taking things so personal. My perspective is off there. I'm thinking I'm the center of the universe, and that's not true. So,
It's
which
hard for people today to
it
understand
is. It
because
is. And I think
why
it's
didn't you like my
parenting.
post?
Yeah.
Why didn't you like my post?
Right.
Why didn't
Yeah.
you why didn't you share my post? Why didn't you
Right.
you're supposed to be my best friend. Why didn't you engage with it?
Right.
Didn't you see what I said? Or my personal favorite is people who like to me, you're an absolute narcissist if you're the person who writes like, another one of those days. I can't believe these people. Well, good for you. And with zero context
Right.
to it, waiting for the animals that feed on that, because you're just an animal if you feed on it, to go, what's going on? You know you're better than that. You know you can handle anything. No, you can't. You suck because you wrote that and you should have never wrote that.
Right.
You're a narcissist looking for crying out for somebody to go, look at me, and probably you have destroyed some other person's life because of your narcissistic behavior. And probably you were birthed by a narcissist who did the exact same thing.
Yep.
That's my personal opinion. I have no science. Jen has all the science. I have no science other than life.
Well, I love that you brought up social media, and I know we're on social media right now. So I mean, it's not, you can't completely vilify it.
Yeah. It's the other one though. It's the person that actually engages with you because you didn't engage with them.
Right. Well, and the thing, I mean, as far as the science goes related to social media, it causes depression, and
I've heard
because
that.
it causes depression, and there's lots of research related to that, especially in teens and preteens, because they're comparing themselves to other people, and we shouldn't be doing that. That brings us back to martial arts training. When you go through the trials and tribulations that you go through, and I used to tell my students all the time that when you earn that belt, or when you get hit really hard and you made it through, you to the other side of it, and you came back to class, no one can take that away from you. You learn something about you, and that you are tougher than you think. You can handle so much more than you think. And you don't have to, make a big deal of that. You just know about yourself. You're just comfortable in who you are. And when you're like that, if somebody doesn't share your post or engage with you or whatever, okay.
Well, you just
So,
brought up a great point, Jen, and it's something that I find very interesting. As you were talking about moving up through martial arts and talking about going in and getting a master's degree in 4 years, starting you with 19 credits. Those, and I used to talk to kids about this when I was a Marine recruiter.
mhm,
You're setting the bar for every other moment in your life. I used to tell kids all the time, when you graduate from boot camp, every other moment in your life, when somebody complains about something or something has physically hurts them, or, they did this, you're going to say, yeah, man, but let me tell you about boot camp. Or when you're on a deployment and somebody's passed away and they don't let you go back. And somebody's like, dude, my dog died. You're like, really? Let me tell you what happened while I was on deployment. Because you're setting that bar and you're looking at other people's situations. And I'm hearing that from you. Like, you have all these bars set. Like, hey, I made a master's degree in 2 years, bar set for education. I wrote a book, bar set for accomplishment. I did martial arts for 30 years, bar set for accomplishment. In your experience with dealing with people and all this, as we're getting real close to the end here, and Nate, I got your question all queued up, man. I'm going to get to it. As you've dealt with people, what is your experience with seeing where these bars have been set for people and how they're not engaging, they're not hitting that more spectrum?
well, if you're thinking about, I don't know, folks today, what you see today with people, and this is another statistic that I came across, and which is in my book in the back, about people being angry. Um, I think I think what happens is, for one, and this is another part I should have brought into, and I do talk about in my book, is grit. We're not teaching people to be gritty, especially kids, to be
Mm-hmm.
gritty, and that and be disappointed. And because if you think about the way people are now and setting these bars high, and I love that you brought up the Marine Corps. My husband was a Marine. Actually, you can't say was, because once one, always a Marine. So um, these bars, I think we set these bars too low for our kids today, and to a fault. And I think that
Trophy culture.
we don't allow them to be disappointed. We want to give them everything. I used to say this all the time, especially in the kids' classes. Um, I didn't get everything that I wanted when I was a kid, and my mom was tough on me, and I turned out great, and I don't feel like I was lacking anything. And today we just seem to want to give them everything, and it's to a fault. So if you think about somebody today that is maybe in their 30s or their 20s, they're not as gritty because they don't have those bars set high for them. And I'm speaking in general terms. There's a lot
Right.
of people that are tough around their kids. I know I was. So tough on mine. Is they don't want to strive themselves to learn different things, and they don't understand disappointment. Like when you're 5, if you don't allow your 5-year-old to be disappointed at the 5-year-old level, when
Right.
they're 25, they're not going to be able to handle what happens at the 25-year-old level. So you're going to do things like, and I'm going to go to an extreme, you're going to go in and shoot up the workplace because you didn't get the the job, or you're going to, I don't know, hurt somebody, or whatever, sit in
I was
your,
gonna say you just don't leave your house and hide in your parents'
well,
basement.
I
Let's
was
go
going to
with
say
that one.
that too. I'm
Let's go
saying
with
that
that
too.
one.
Like
Let's go with that one.
you're going to hide in the basement and go, "Oh my god, I hope somebody likes my post."
Right.
So
Oh, woe is me. Everything else is the world's fault. It's not my fault. Well,
right.
it's trophy culture. It's truly trophy culture for
Yep.
everything. And trying to teach people how to here's the other thing that I think we learn in martial arts, and I would recommend to anyone, look, even if you're like, I don't want to punch people, I don't want to get punched, go take one of those boxing classes that they just teach you how to punch a bag and you never get into a ring. You'll at least learn how to throw a punch, and you'll understand that snapping action and what muscles you're using that are very different than anything else you've ever used in life. But I think one of the things that you gain out of martial arts is a sense of positive disappointment.
Mhm.
And what I mean
I
by that,
love that.
folks,
Yeah, I
is
love that.
you can, like, I can't tell you how many times Keith Bedina was my Shihan at Sabatim Ryu Aikido, and I watched that dude grapple 10, 15 people throughout the class and tap all of us, and then have somebody come over and go check my pulse.
Yeah.
And being able to sit there and go, son of a gun, how is this dude just tapping out people left and right? And I mean, we're talking about Penn State collegiate wrestlers
Mhm.
and that were heavyweights that were coming over, and he was like, and just gripping them up, and it was game over.
Yep.
So I'm going to recommend that all of you find a martial arts, even if it's just to understand your own body and what you
Mhm.
can do, and have a
Yep.
time where you don't have your phone in your hand, you don't have a TV in your face,
Right.
and for an hour you are focused on this. Now, Nate asked a very important question, and I could tell you the answer to mine, which was Nate. The answer to mine was the fridge in the dojo had beer, and after the crowd of people that were kind of around, there was a core group of us that always stuck around and enjoyed an adult beverage or two. It's a little different than most, but we were all a different crowd. Nate wants to know, what was your favorite go-to meal after class? Did you have a go-to, like, hey, I'm done class, I want this?
Well, I will say that after my first degree black belt test, which mine was 2 days,
Right.
they did it for 2 days, and it was the only time they ever did it. And I was so grateful, actually, now looking back on it, that it was 2 days. Um, the first day was, probably about 7 hours, and the second day was, I think we were there for like 4 or 5 hours. The second day was the sparring. But anyway, after that, I went to, and I don't eat meat. I haven't eaten meat now in close to 15 years, but at that time I was still eating meat. And I went to Jumpin' Jacks, if anybody's familiar with that,
Absolutely.
in Scotia. I went to
Absolutely.
Jumping Jacks and had a Jack burger with two
Nice.
two of my colleagues that I tested with. And I remember we had our belts around our necks because they were our first degree black belts. We had our belts hanging around our necks. We were sucking down those Jack burgers. So I would say that, and I'm not an advocate for eating meat anymore, but probably like pasta. I still do love pizza. I just don't have cheese on my pizza. But yeah, those are the main meals. But pasta's always good because it kind of replenishes you. The starch and it's a comfort food. So I don't know what does Nathan have? Does he train and does he?
He used to train. I don't know if Nathan has anything for us, like if he what his go to. I know recently he lost a ton of weight.
Oh, good for him.
He took good care of himself and got himself situated. But look, folks, if you're curious what Jan's got going on, you want to know about her, I know you can find her on LinkedIn at Jan Raeder. I'm going to get Raeder is Raeder. You can find her at SelfCareSensei.com. You can see what she's got going on. Any upcoming live events, things that you've got happening that you're like, hey, this is where you can find me at, or this is what's happening.
Well, I'm trying to, I'm really grateful for your, taking a chance on me, having a conversation. I'm really grateful for that because I have really enjoyed our time, and I can't wait to put it on my website because I have a new section of media on my website. And actually next month, I'm doing a talk at MIT, and that will be recorded and then available on my website. So that is kind of what I'm prepping for now, is that talk at MIT.
Nice.
And
wow.
I've got a couple other, I'm trying to always be on podcasts if I can, because I really enjoy them. I love having these kind of conversations. So that's another opportunity. And really, I'm retired now from martial arts. I retired in 2000, and in 2018 I retired. So this is what my focus is now, is to help people get the information about my book and to start using my book. If you have questions about my book, please reach out to me on LinkedIn and message me. I'm happy to answer. If you wind up buying it, thank you very much. If you wind up buying it and you have additional questions, I would love that, because I've had people say, well, what's your next book about? And I'm like, I don't know. I have to see what people think about this and then say, oh, well, we want to talk more about this. So then I can dig deeper into that area because people are confused, are curious about it. So hopefully that will pan out. And, anybody that has a small business, I'm happy to come and talk at your business if you want to, because I'm really about the individual, but individuals make up businesses and organizations. So the better your individuals are, the better your organization is going to be.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy to come and do that too. So that's definitely something if anybody's interested in that.
Well, Jan, I know you've fully immersed yourself in the entire culture of the Above the Bar podcast. You've listened to we're up to 270 something at this point shows. You've listened to all of them. So you know what's coming next, and don't log off as soon as we're done. We got to talk for a couple minutes post show. But the guest always gets the final word. So what's our final word tonight?
The final word is your well-being and your wellness matters. Everything you do touches someone else's life. So if you don't develop the longest relationship you have, which is the one with yourself, if you don't develop that, your life is going to be tougher. You need to understand who you are, invest in learning about who you are, and have a good time. And don't take things so personally. It's whatever somebody's upset about something, it maybe has nothing to do with you. So those are those main things. Wellness matters.
Alrighty, folks, be sure to push your stool in. This has been a Second Front podcast presentation found on Apple, Spotify, and wherever podcasts can be found.